I'm Celeste, and this is 10 Minutes of History. Today I'm going to talk to you about Samuel Dunnells. He's right, picture is right here, and his significant contribution to Newport Beach, which may surprise you in the end. So Samuel was born in Belfast, Maine in 1824. He is the son of a ship captain. His grandfather was a ship captain. His uncle was a ship captain, and he remembers fondly sitting on the hearth of their fireplace in Belfast, listening to his uncle tell about this very far away place called San Diego that he had been to, and how wonderful the weather was there and how beautiful the bay was there. And he always kept that in his mind. He later in life, as he got older and he started being a very accomplished ship captain, he sailed boats up and down North and South America, up the Mississippi. He ran a boat in the Great Lakes. Some of the roughest waters he was able to navigate, and he became extremely accomplished. So later, when he decides to leave Belfast and come out to California for the gold rush, which he did in 1850. And I don't know if you know how you got here in 1850 from Maine, but just like Irvine and Ghirardelli and Strauss, anyone who came here for the gold rush, you had to go down to Panama, and this is pre-canal and even pre-train across Panama. So you would take a steamer down to Panama, get off, and then from there to get across the isthmus, you would take canoes, because there were two rivers at that time that they ended up damming and flooding to make the canal. And then there was at least a 50-mile trek through the jungle, which if you had enough money, you could pay an exorbitant amount of money and take a mule. And then you got to the other side. And then you would get on a different steamer and come up to San Francisco. That took about 8 weeks from the East Coast to get back up to San Francisco. Of course, all that changed when we got the Intercontinental Railroad, and then you could do it in, just a matter of days. So he did that. He went up, and what he decided to do was, like Irvine did, he decided to supply the miners. He did a little bit of mining, but decided the big money was in supply. So he bought a couple barges and pushed those barges full of flour up the Feather River to Sutter County, and helped to feed the miners that were up there, and made a good amount of money doing that. He went back to Belfast after that, got married, and brought his new wife, Hannah, who actually went by Elizabeth, but Hannah brought her to California, and they ran a store out of Shasta County and stayed in that business. When they were visiting San Francisco one day, they walked into A.E. Horton's office in San Francisco. Now, A.E. Horton had bought 1,000 acres in San Diego for 30 cents an acre. And if you think about the layout of San Diego, you have up on the hill, you have the Mission, and under that you have Old Town. And everything else from Old Town to the wharf area was pretty vacant. And no one wanted to live down there. It was muddy and was not a desirable place to be. So that's why he was able to purchase all of that old Pueblo land for such a low price. He turned around out of his office in San Francisco and sold those lots. Now, in 1850, a man had purchased a lot in San Diego and from the Pueblo, and he built a hotel on that site, and it was called the New San Diego Hotel. He had that for like 10, 15 years, and then Horton purchased it from him for $100 when he made his purchase of all of that property. And he ended up selling that to Dunnells and his wife for $1,000. And so they then made the trek down to San Diego, which Samuel had remembered from his uncle, and they reopened the New San Diego Hotel. Now, that whole area was at that time called Newtown. And in Newtown, at the July after they moved there, there were between 25 and 35 people living in Newtown. And so that was the entire population in Newtown. There were more people up in Old Town, but this was the settlement, and they were there with all these other people who had come from different countries and different places. And his wife said it was fairly lonely. I think she said there were 10 women in town, And when about a year into that, a man came and opened a store, and he was generous, and he gave them all a nice piece of calico, which was actually more than the lots were selling at that time, because this was a coveted item to get fabric at that time. This is a picture of his wife, Hannah. And I think she was a very tolerant wife, because he kept going back out to sea, and I think it was very hard to be the wife of a seaman. So he decided that he longed for the sea again, and so he bought himself a boat, and this is the Vaquero that he purchased right here. And this is actually a picture of it in Newport Bay. So he was using this boat to carry freight up and down the coast from Mexico to Santa Barbara. And at that time, if you were going to drop off freight in those areas, in our area, there were two places to go. One was obviously San Pedro, and that was the bay that Banning had built. And then there was Anaheim Landing, which was originally just a beach, basically, a little inlet in there where you would bring in goods. And that was, I think, 12 miles to Anaheim from there. And so that's where you unloaded any freight that was going to be then sent up the road to Anaheim. So Dunnells had been doing business in Anaheim Landing, and he actually owed quite a bit of back debt to them. So on just a regular day in 1870 in September, he had an extra load of shingles and wood in the Vaquero that had come down from the north, and he decided to bring it back up to Anaheim Landing to sell it. As he was going by Newport Bay, which was then San Joaquin Bay, he knew that Mr. McFadden had recently sold a large part of the bluffs to new farmers, which was at that time called Gospel Swamp up there at that area. And the farmers called it the Promised Land, because the Santa Ana River had created a very fertile water table up there, and so you could grow just about anything up there. And so, but the problem they had was that they didn't have enough wood to build fences and barns or homes, and Dunnells knew that. So as he's coming up the coast in 1870, and here's this great Putnam map we have here, he's coming up here and he comes by the entrance to the San Joaquin Bay. Super dangerous. Everything that's written about that at the time, no one had brought any significant sized boat in there prior to this. Mainly it was just canoes and things going in and out. So this was a very daring attempt by him. But this boat he had this big advantage, because this has a very shallow draft. And it also has a wheel on it. So if he got stuck on a sandbar, he could reverse himself off using that wheel. So he did that. A good part of his incentive was that he owed this money up in Anaheim and at Anaheim Landing. And had he gone and sold his wares there, the docking area would have taken, the wharf would have taken all of his money. So he comes in here and he toodles in here. Of course, there's no Balboa Island at that time. He's all across these sandbars, and he comes back into our upper bay. And he goes a significant way into the upper bay and then decides to come back out because he's seen this nice little flat land right here, which is basically at PCH in Dover. And he front ends that boat right into there. Now, these farmers up on the hill have seen him because this is a big white boat that they've never seen a boat come in the bay. And so they are in their buck wagons, and they're tooling down to the bottom down here and to see what he has, and they buy all of his wood and shingles, so he's thrilled. They also bring him raw wood because this is a steamship that burns wood, and they fill him back up with wood, and he takes the wheat and some of their other crops back with him. And so he gets in his boat, comes back out of the bay, goes back down to San Diego, and what do you think he says to his wife? He says, "Elizabeth, I found a Newport." And so from then on, we have the name Newport. And for a long time, it was two words, and then they condensed it to make it into Newport. And so the Newport at that time is the area that McFadden owns. It's the area up on the bluffs up here where the farmers are. And then this becomes Newport Landing, the place where he was. Now, the two people who are most excited about this are McFadden and Irvine. McFadden lived in New York, and Irvine lived in San Francisco. They owned the parts, the two old ranchos McFadden owns a part of the old Santa Ana Rancho, and Irvine owns the San Joaquin Rancho. So Irvine, he has all of his sheep on his 100,000 acres that he owns, and so he wants to get that wool to market, and it's hard to get it up to Anaheim and or to San Pedro, and it costs him a lot of money. So he's so excited to think that there's a possibility that now he can ship out of the bay. And McFadden is equally excited because he now knows that his farmers and his own farm can get their grains and products out of the bay and make a quicker and cheaper exit out of the area. And so they both come back to the Newport area. They meet on the Irvine Ranch and to discuss the fact that they would like to also create a wharf in that area, and which they end up doing. But at that meeting is the ranch manager's wife, and she says you should call it Newport because it's a new port in the area. And so she gets credit for it, and Dunnells gets credit for it. We don't know exactly who did it first, but so we're going to give them equal credit. So that's how we got our name. Later on, the names change because when McFadden ends up moving his business from inside the bay, Newport Landing, out to the point here at Newport Beach, this becomes Newport Beach. This becomes the old landing, and they changed the name of Newport up here, which is McFadden's land, to Greenville. And there's a lot of things up in Greenville still. Greenville School, Greenville Church. There's a street named Greenville up there. So I think we're about 10 minutes of history, and that was good. Thanks for joining us today. Bye.